I'm gonna jump right into to my part of the presentation. Okay, so as you see there, not being memorable is the same as being invisible. That's sort of everything I preach. It's what I truly believe in. It's what I, lived through myself, and it's also what I tell my clients, whether they be a brand or a person or anything like that. So, as I mentioned, I'm here today to talk about the importance of having a personal brand, how to design it. I got to tell you, usually when I do a keynote anywhere, I always start with a personal story so people can relate to me. My favorite story that I share is it's really an adorable anecdote about 9/11 that gets people really uncomfortable. I'm going to skip that story today in light of everything that's going on in the world. It just didn't seem really funny, but I wanted to highlight the fact that this is how I set up my talks because it does play into a lot of how I've designed my personal brand. So skipping that. Um, Also, whenever I give my talks, I like to sort of chat with people ahead of time and kind of get a feeling of, who's in the room, what I can get away with, how far I can push the envelope, and things like that. And one thing I always find that when I talk to people is that a lot of people have really built their personal brands. Really around where they work. I identify myself by the fact that I work at Amazon or I work at Facebook or Disney. And if you don't identify, if you haven't built your personal brand really around where you work, a lot of people build their personal brand about where they went to school. So those are the sort of the tent pole things about their personal brand. And I got to tell you, it's cool, I guess, but it's not that interesting. I will never tell you about where I went to school. I'll certainly tell you about where I work because I work for myself. But everything about your brand should be memorable, should be shareable. Otherwise it's forgettable. So while we're all stuck inside or working from home for an extended period of time, oh my God, I'm already cabin fever and bored stiff already. Your day job is your day job, and that's how you make money. Hopefully all of us still have like day jobs and stuff like that, but your real job, and every day you should be working on your personal brand, because no one is going to talk about you unless you give them things to talk about. Nobody's really going to care about you unless there's something to care about. So this is super important because your personal brand is what people want to remember about you. It's not only what they want to remember about you, it's what they will and do remember about you. And especially in these times, and the reason we decided to do personal brand as sort of the first topic of these talks is being out of sight and out of mind, which is going to be incredibly easy for a lot of people because we are all out of sight, out of mind, working from home. Is going to be career suicide. The people who are going to get opportunities, whether they be freelance or work or promotions, things like that, they're going to be the people who stand out. There's going to be the people that are memorable. They're going to be the people who do things that people notice. So I want to show you guys, obviously, how to be noticed and how to be memorable. So let's take a look at my brand. And the way I've sort of plotted out the way I'm going to sort of show you guys everything is we're going to, in real time, well, not really real time because I made the presentation already, but sort of in real time, we're going to reverse engineer how I built my brand. And what I want you guys to do is see exactly, pull back the curtain and do the same thing for yourself. So you'll notice with my brand, it is much heavier on the professional side than the personal side. And that's by choice. I am all over the internet, but I don't really tell you too much about, my personal life and things like that. You certainly can if you want to. These are the decisions you make when you sort of go in and make build your personal brand. So who am I? If you do an internet search of me anywhere, and I'm all over the place, you'll notice that I run a non-traditional marketing agency that specializes in creative ideas, content, and marketing stunts that get noticed and remembered. If you look at the picture, you'll see I'm gorgeous, and I wear a lot of clothes with my own face on it, and I've got red glasses. The red glasses are part of my brand, but they're not what we're talking about now. I don't really think of like clothing and personal style really as part of building your brand. It's certainly something that comes into it. My glasses are part of my brand because I've made it my company identity, but no part of personal brand that I talk about today is going to be, hey, you should be the jeans guy or you should be the suit guy. Um, when I talk about myself online, I overshare a lot. I post a lot of things on the internet, and the type of things that I overshare is I post a lot of my professional achievements. I give away a lot of free content. I wrote contest, it's a typo. I give a lot of free content through social and video. I did a video just the other day where I spoke for 18 minutes and basically outlined exactly how brands should be handling marketing and messaging right now going through COVID. I throw a lot of things out in the world. Some of it sticks, some of it doesn't, because again, everything I'm talking about is going to be about staying top of mind and being out there in the world. I use the same practices that I use for myself as I use for my clients, and the results have been because I'm out there, because I share so much of my professional accomplishments, and people just see like me busy, busy, busy. I haven't had a client check a reference in 16 years, mostly because almost all my results and things are living in the real world. I use the internet as a resume. I use it as a living, breathing, constantly growing. This is what I did. So you can almost track how busy I've been in my career by ebbs and flows of content and things like that. So reversing engineering my brand, how I built it based on 5 pillars. So if you guys don't really understand what I'm talking about pillars, there's 5 sort of legs of things that I've built my brand on, and I use these pillars to make quick decisions. If I'm given an opportunity, if I'm asked to write a piece of content, if someone asks me to appear somewhere, if something, if it doesn't fit into most of my pillars, or if it misses all my pillars, I don't even have to think about it. That's not for me. If the project isn't, really hit a couple of my pillars that let me shine at what I'm best at, that project is not for me. When I'm speaking about myself or when I'm asking other people to write about me or things like that, the pillars are a great guide of exactly how I want to be represented, exactly how I want to be remembered, exactly how I want to be, shared out in the world. So I'm going to go walk you through my pillars. And while I'm doing this, I really hope you guys start thinking about what your own pillars are or could be. If you've ever thought about pillars, please start jotting down, little bits and pieces about what your pillars could be. And just before I do that, I'm going to take a sip of warm water to soothe my throat. So I've already sort of talked about this slide. I'm going to skip it, but it's the five pillars. So my personal brand, and I keep using personal brand, but it's really just my brand because my brand is personal and professional. I am someone who doesn't really believe there's such a thing as work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration. You don't have to live by this. And one other thing I want to tell you, I do not believe in absolutism for anything. What's worked for me, I want you guys to learn from me, copy me, steal anything that I tell you today, but run it through your own filter because not everything is going to fit super perfectly for every person who's listening today. So by no means is this the only way. This is the way I build my brand. This is the way I teach people to build brands. It works, but I'm not going to, lie to you and say this is the only way you can build your brand. So my personal brand is built around fun. If you guys see the picture here, that is Evel Knievel, 1970, I think, at the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto, Canada. Evel Knievel, hopefully you guys all know, was a horrible racist, but a wonderfully playful daredevil who was very famous in the 70s and 80s for jumping over things and basically crashing and getting all of his bones broken. The way I describe my brand is fun is, part of the reason people hire me is when I talk about marketing stunts. One of the things that sort of got me a lot of attention early in my career was, and you'll see a few of the stories and references I talk about in my presentation today. A lot of them took place in and around South by Southwest, the music conference in music and technology conference in Austin, Texas, that was canceled this year, of course, because of COVID. Um, so at the time, I was working for a company called FreshBooks, the online invoicing company for small businesses and creative professionals, and we would always stunt South by Southwest, and it was always a challenge to go in with not a lot of budget, create an experience for people that people would remember, and sort of, own the mind share of the conference. So now South by Southwest is all experiential, and people, turn over restaurants and brand them and do all sorts of crazy things and build, recreate Westworld. I like to think we were probably one of the first 3 or 4 brands that really did some crazy things at South by Southwest. So I'm really bad with timelines. I don't remember how many years ago this was. It was a handful of years ago. But what we did was we basically got a permit for the park right across from the convention center. If you've been to South by Southwest recently, that park is always booked for events, and you wouldn't even know it was a park anymore. But it used to be just a field of grass that people ate lunch over. We decided that one of the ways we were going to get a lot of attention was we were going to recreate Evil Knievel's crazy jump over the school buses. And between you and me, the origin of the idea came from that I just wanted someone to buy me an Evil Knievel jumpsuit. But basically we got 2 school buses because I wasn't going to jump over 19 of them. Got a motorcycle, got the jumpsuit. We branded the ramps. There was hashtags and all sorts of things. And if you ever saw Evil Knievel jump over school buses, it was 45 seconds of jump and 45 minutes of just nonsense. So we basically replicated it exactly. Drove around in circles, drove to the top of the ramp, took my helmet off, elevator pitched these people for 10 minutes, went down, drove around, drove around, drove around. And the reason I kept driving in circles and creating the suspense of the jump was we only put a thimble full of gas in the tank of the motorcycle, and I was trying to wait for it to run out of gas. So once the bike actually did run out of gas, we had a couple hundred people there. Walk to the top of the ramp, defecatingly, self-defacing. I don't know. You know a word I'm trying to come up with. I apologize for wasting everyone's time, and I gave everybody, a month free trial of the product as sort of I'm sorry. The goal was always to give these people a free trial of the product. The goal was to give them a conversation. The goal was to give them an experience. I was never going to jump over these school buses, but it was one of the most talked about things for, the rest of the conference. Everything I do has to have an element of fun in it because, one, that's where my personality lies, but it's also where my brand lies. One of my clients is Foxtel Australia, Fox Television in Australia, and they had hired me last summer to come over and help them promote to Australian people the American television content that they were putting on Australian TV. So one of the shows was Mayans, which is a spinoff of Sons of Anarchy. And what we did was we basically I brainstormed for a little bit by myself, came up with this idea where we created our own motorcycle gang, and we hired actors and got motorcycles, and we just terrorized the streets of Sydney for a week before the premiere of the show, and got some coverage. People were pissed off. We would stop at bus stops and things and scream at people and do all this stuff. And on the day of the release of the premiere of the first episode of Mayans, if you had asked for an Uber, there was about a 10% chance you'd be picked up in one of our Harley Davidsons with our bikers. We added sidecars to the motorcycles now, and we had GoPro cameras. We created all this content of people sort of getting scooted around the city in our motorcycles that people, they knew it was a bit of a stunt because the back of the jackets actually had Foxtel branding and things like that. But again, it's always about fun. The other pillar of my brand is about smart. So for the last 20 years, I've been calling myself the smartest man in the world. It's like sort of like an untrademarked trademark. And two things happen when you start calling yourself this something like smartest man in the world. Other people start calling you that, and Google sorts of starts calling you that. So according to Google, I'm like the third smartest person in the world. But everything I do, you hire me because I am smart. You hire me because I know what I am talking about. I am full value. I'm not going to, you put me on a stage and there is going to be 100 takeaways. You hire me as a client, as a consultant, I'm going to solve your problems. So, my pillars are in no particular order except for really the last one, which is the least important. But I don't want to be known as just the fun guy because fun only goes so far. I don't want to be known as the smart guy who's also boring because that only goes so far. All my pillars need to kind of be working at the same time as yours should be as well. So smart is very, very important for me because I am smart and I can solve your problem. I'm just going to do it in a fun way. So this is a talk I gave at a conference, and this slide, and there was someone doing kind of like sketch notes. So you can see over the course of a 30-minute talk, there's a dozen or 2 dozen takeaways there. Everything I do, they always say if you think you're the smartest person in the world in the room, you're in the wrong room. Well, fuck that. I am the smartest person in the room, and I'm okay with that. So take it for whatever you want. I don't know if this video is going to play. If it doesn't play, I'm just going to tell you about it. But I'm going to, and I don't know if you'll be able to hear anything, but I'm going to play it anyways and explain it. Okay, so that video, and I know I forwarded to the next slide, but let me talk about the video for a second. That video was a stunt we did for Xero. Xero is a online accounting platform. Their main competitor is QuickBooks. They asked me to come up with what I call a polite disruption of their user conference. So, working with that's Max Major, a semi-famous but incredible illusionist and magician. We came up with this idea of doing this sort of sitting on a cloud routine because it's cloud-based software, and and we parked right at the front door of their conference. So you figure putting one person in front of the front door of their conference, how's that actually disrupting everything? Well, we had a 200-person lineup to have their picture taken with Max. Inside the conference was a bunch of video walls, showing all the tweets. And basically, we had more logo coverage inside their conference for Xero than there was for Intuit. Magic Johnson, who was a keynote speaker at the beginning of the conference, stood up in front of however many people were in the crowd, 1,000 people, and asked, "What's Xero?" And this, and this. And a lot of people were pissed off at us, but the reason I call this a polite disruption instead of an actual disruption is, and this is where I think it's smart, we didn't sell anything, we didn't offer a discount, we weren't there to sort of really derail their conference or be disruptive. Inside their trade hall, the exhibit hall, there were 19 companies that work with us and them. So we actually handed out a postcard that said, once you're inside, go visit these 19 people. They work with both companies. I'm sure some of your customers work with both companies. You should get to know them all. So we weren't there to, shut it down, cause problems, even though we did kind of cause problems and they were really pissed off at me. But I'm super proud of that because I think we made our client happy. We created a stir, memorable, tons of content was created out of it. We got on the local news, all sorts of things. So again, smart, fun, build to the next one, which is inappropriate that you can see on the screen. I'm proud of the fact that I'm a little inappropriate. The type of things that people are going to come to me for are going to be things that no one else has seen before. If you see on the right side of the screen or left side, I don't know what side you can see, but the Peep Show. So again, working with Foxtel in Australia to promote the show Pose, which was a show about the early 90s New York City Vogue, gay and lesbian, trans community. It was a popular TV show. We took over about 25 abandoned storefronts all throughout Sydney, and we created these windows fronts that said Peep Show. And when you look through that little circle, when you looked at a little circle, you got to see the trailer for the show. You heard the trailer. We originally, the original pitch was create a real 70s or late 80s, early 90s New York Times Square peep show, but they thought that was a little too edgy, so we toned it down a little bit. But the idea of it all was still there. We created this peep show, and you got to see the trailer, and people talked about it and took a lot of pictures and things like that. For a company I work with called Methodify, which is a data research company, and they really they're all about testing advertising before you put it on the thing. We created a series of bad ads, purposely bad ads or mildly offensive ads, put them out in the world just so people could see what bad ads would be. And the funny thing is the purpose of it and everything we thought of. So these were our baby thongs, brilliant idea. The reason we put out bad ads was to actually show in real time that you need to test your creative, because as half the people that were offended by this, also we set up a real website and the whole deal, we had orders for them. We could have gone into business. So it's so hard to judge what people actually think is good and bad and offensive and not. So we demonstrated in real time. You should have seen the other ads. We created Me Too Soda. We created a lot of really funny stuff, at least stuff I thought was funny. But again, inappropriate-ish, not offensive. We're not, going over the line. I always tell people you figure out where that line is of good taste. You cross it by two baby steps, because it's those two baby steps that are the places where the memories and things are going to make. And, in a couple more slides, I'm going to show you where those two baby steps are in sort of my personal brand. The other pillar is, my personal brand is built around professional results. So I have been written about in 5 New York Times best-selling marketing books. I've been featured in Inc., Forbes, Fast Company, New York Times. All this is really impressive, as you can imagine. I wish I could figure out how to make money off of it, but one day. But my work has been covered all over the place. And I make sure my work has been covered all over the place, because for as many recognizable brands as I work with a lot of companies you've never heard of. So I'm always, it's almost like an insecurity, but I always need to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. And I'm going to keep sharing it, even though if it comes off as gross. I don't really care if it comes off as gross, because ultimately my number one responsibility is to create revenue for myself, and to, create, happiness and results for my clients. So if I keep shouting how smart and wonderful and great and successful I am, and you're offended by that, that's fine. Like, what are you going to do? Like I said before, I don't believe in absolutism. This is what works for me. It's part of my brand persona. If you're not comfortable with talking about your own accomplishments, then don't talk about them, and just sort of skip over that and make it a different part of your brand. The last pillar, and I'd say this is the least important, but I take a lot of pride in this. Um, the final pillar that I've built my brand around is knowing how to please a woman. And if we were in like a live audience, oh boy, does this just kill the room. People just fall over themselves and thing. But this is the least important when I'm talking about my brand, but it's also the most important. And I'm going to tell you why. When people talk about me, they talk about things with a bit of a slant to them. So, you know, I've had tweets about, people telling me that they want to meet me up after a talk and make out, or all sorts of crazy things. I don't do that because I'm afraid, of getting, hurt or whatever. But if you look at the bottom picture, a woman once gave me her underwear at a conference, and she was so young. So the story ends there. But I've entered that into the world. I think it's funny, but beyond funny, here's why I did it. This is my 2 baby steps past the line of good taste. And whatever you decide is your 2 baby steps past the line of good taste, you figure out what's true to your brand. But the reason I do this is everybody needs a differentiator. So guess what? My pillars: smart, fun, inappropriate, professional accomplishments. There's a lot of other people that can say they're smart, they're fun, and have professional accomplishments. So I need one more thing that other people aren't going to do. You'll need one more thing. And it doesn't have to be, that, you've got, hedonistic tendencies. It could be, you know, it could be that, whatever, these are kind of lazy ones, but you could be the TV expert, or you could be this, or you could be that. But you honestly need something outside of your business frame to make you more human. You need something that people are going to want to actually choose you over someone else. And I've just sort of stuck with this, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. And I'll talk about that in a second, but it makes me laugh. And I got to tell you, it's memorable. It's more memorable than anything else that I talk about. So this is going to be rapid fire. You guys are ready? I never take a day off from building my brand, and you shouldn't either. Figure out what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. Again, this is the part you could steal every idea here or not steal them. Figure out what works for you. But I put my face on everything. I wear sneakers with my face on them. I've made tattoos with my name on them that I've given out to 1,000 people. I ship out T-shirts and stickers and pins and all sorts of things. If you want to buy a T-shirt, go to I Love Saul or Saul shirt. There's a couple good styles there. I started a cult. If you go to what is it, the Saul Colt.com instead of Colt, my last name Cult. You sign up, and once a year, I just mail you stupid stuff. Last year I mailed people pins with my face on it. This year, I'm doing a few other ideas and stuff like that if we're ever allowed to go to the post office again. But again, I invest a lot of time, money, and energy in staying top of mind. It is so important to stay top of mind because we're not going to be bumping into people at conferences anymore. We're not going to be bumping into people, having these accidental, serendipitous collisions with people. So you're going to have to work even harder to maintain that you're thought of for a project, you're thought of for promotion, you're thought of for a job, you're thought of for any opportunity. Just last night, I got a shipment of fabric that I'm going to make, and I'm making the prototype today, and we're going to go into I'm not doing it, a tailor's doing it, but I'm making about 5,000 non-medical masks. So these won't be for frontline workers or anything like that, but this will be like regular folk who just want to sort of protect themselves from, Corona and going to the grocery store and stuff like that. I'm making masks with my face on it. And I guarantee you I'm gonna get shit for it. And people are gonna say I'm like an egomaniac and I'm an awful person. But guess what? I'm giving out 5,000 free masks. You don't want one, don't take one. I'm not gonna get business out of this. I'm not putting my URL or anything. I'm doing it because one, I kind of do think it's hilarious. But two, it's just another thing to talk about. It's another thing. It's the hashtag, it's Saul for good. This is actually for good. This is better than sending a pin or something like that. So while we're stuck at home, while you're building your brand, you can either go to the extent I go to or not, but figure out what is that one small thing you could do to get people to remember you. I have jackets with my face on it. It's disgusting how many things I have with my face on it, but like I like it at this point. When I started, it made me a little uncomfortable, but now like I'm just numb to it all. And I honestly think most people are numb to it, who are around me as well too. So don't worry if you feel like a little uncomfortable by it. You do. And of course, I've also got a necklace in my face. And um, I'm almost done here, and I'm gonna move on. The real key part of the takeaway from this are those pillars. So please figure out what your pillars are, stick to them, make them true to yourself. And that's really important. So if you're not all exhausted by me yet, I'm going to tell you another quick little story, where it all started, because I wasn't always like this. I was just like anybody. But about 2007, I started my professional speaking career, and I was really excited. So I asked my dad to come see me talk. That's my dad. That's the man right there. We drove together to this event, and we drove home. And it was really interesting because my dad's demeanor sort of was excited to see me on the drive to the event, and coming home it was a little bit of a different talk. And it was interesting. He kind of said, he loved my talk. He thought I was great. I was poised. I carried the stage, all that stuff, but it wasn't me. And he said that it I wasn't being true to myself. Of course, everybody knows now the horrible expression, live your authentic life, or whatever the cliche is. But he said I wasn't being myself. I wasn't telling jokes. I wasn't being inappropriate. I hadn't built pillars yet, but my dad was almost telling me what my pillars were without even realizing. And he said something to me that was really interesting. He says it doesn't matter if these people don't know who you are yet. Ultimately, they're there to see you. I'm sure there's a bunch of people on this stream today that have no clue who I am. So going back to what my dad said, he said, give them you and never worry if they don't like you, because if you think something is funny, share it. So he was really focusing more on just the humor side of things. But if you think something's smart, share it. If you think something's valuable, share it. If you're sitting around going, what content could I be creating? I came up with how companies should be marketing and messaging and during COVID, so I shared it. Don't hold yourself back. Listen to my dad. People don't know who you are yet. It doesn't matter. They're still like they need this information. So um once I took that to heart, it took me about a year. I didn't just, light bulb suddenly come the persona I am now. But I'd say a few years ago, I was speaking at a conference, probably about 3 years after that, speaking at a conference in between Mark Cuban and Seth Godin. And this was the exact day that Zappos and Amazon merge. And six out of sorry, out of the six speakers of the day, everybody had their own opinion of the deal and why it happened, and who won and who lost and all that. And I went up and just talked about myself. I kind of like what I did today. I just gave examples of things I've done, tied it into marketing lessons and things like that. And I didn't care less about the Amazon deal because sincerely, I didn't know why it happened, and nobody knows why they happen. So all these people who were talking about it were full of shit. And that's really the day, that's my origin story. That's the day I started being, Saul, the guy who puts his face on everything. And I asked the audience sincerely why I didn't have my own TV show yet. And I made the whole talk about myself. And, some people, love what I do and some people hate what I do. But I only use my own examples to teach marketing because one, why wouldn't I if I've done the things? And two, as you'll see in the Q&A part of this, you can ask me anything about anything I've ever done, and I can tell you where the idea came from all the way to the results. Where if I'm just standing on stage talking about companies I've never, worked with, everything's just kind of bullshit and made up stuff. So once I changed my approach, people started calling, and I was getting projects with recognizable brands and bigger things. And, people started to love me. This is a real, Photoshop picture of 1,000 people waiting for me at an airport somewhere. But I tell this story because one, it has fancy names in it. People go, whoa, he spoke at a place with Mark Cuban. And I have a great Mark Cuban story, which I won't share with you now because I got to let Clint talk in a minute. But it demonstrates the importance of not following the pack. Okay. I've already told you, like, my number one goal is to create revenue for myself and value for my clients. Your number one goal with your personal brand should be memorable and true to yourself. So whether you have to, go for a car ride with my dad and he's available, he's got nothing to do, for him to sort of like kick you in the pants and tell you this stuff, it's really important that your brand is true to yourself, and you're not living a lie or a character or stuff like that. So my brand, I have the best and worst brand imaginable. My brand, gives me a lot of work, not currently right now in this world, but it also scares a lot of people away. So for all the doors that have been open for me, a bunch have been closed. So, you know, I would say, copy what I do, copy the lessons that I've learned, but, you know, also never consider me, there's a bunch of brands that don't consider me for things I'd be great for because, like, just kind of, that differentiator I've chosen about the whole, knows how to please a woman and inappropriate and stuff like that. But I'm okay with that because I'm showing the real me. I never worry if people don't like me because, like my dad said, if I think something's funny, I share it. If I think an idea is great, I work really hard to make that idea great. And, I'm very fortunate. I don't need 1,000 customers to, keep 1,000 employees paid. I've got a small group of people I work with. Everyone's like looked after. I treat them very well and stuff like that. So, but when you are designing your brand, remember you can never be something for everybody. And I'd even go as far to say if some people don't like you, if everyone loves you, you're doing it wrong. Some people have to dislike you, whether they're jealous or just whatever. They just don't believe the same things you do. You don't have to go as far as I've gone because I've gone that far because it's kind of who I am. But you do need that differentiator. That differentiator is the thing that really is kind of the most valuable thing. And you should live that way too. That's my own kind of like soapbox thing. Don't, like, live your best life, whatever the cliche is. So wrapping up, I think this is my last slide. What is your brand now? Now that you've sort of, gone through my little design process and the pillars, if you're, I really want you guys to think long and hard about what your pillars would be, what you stand for, how it works into everything that you do. And then, Clint's going to tell you a few more things and Chris is going to tell you how to get that brand out in the world. But without that foundation, everything crumbles. I could make up a bunch of bullshit about a house and stuff like that. But these pillars are my foundation. I never stray from them. I never sort of put myself in situations that don't sort of drive back to my pillars. So please, when you're designing your brand, you're thinking about what your personal brand would be, start with pillars. I originally started with 3 and built up to 5. I'm not going to go any further than 5. I've stuck with these 5 for about 5 years. But if you can't think of 5, start with 3. 3 is a really good place to start with pillars.